They had it all: power, wealth, and the admiration of an entire city. Judge Marquita Stokes and her husband, Kendrick Stokes, were the embodiment of success in Dallas. She was a respected judge, a woman who commanded the courtroom with intelligence and authority. He was a self-made real estate mogul, a man whose charm and business acumen had built an empire. Together, they were unstoppable. A power couple admired by many, envied by even more. But behind closed doors, the perfect marriage was nothing more than an illusion. Beneath the expensive suits, the high-profile events, and the staged smiles, a storm was brewing, one fueled by lies, betrayal, and a thirst for control. No one could have predicted the deadly turn their love story would take. No one imagined that the same woman who upheld the law with an iron fist would one day be at the center of a murder plot so cold, so calculated, that it would shock the nation. How does love turn to obsession? How does a woman sworn to deliver justice become the mastermind behind a brutal crime? This is the case of Judge Marquita Stokes, a woman who had everything but chose revenge over reason. Before we dive into this chilling story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more tales of love, lies, and betrayal. Judge Marquita Stokes was more than a legal powerhouse, she was a legend in Dallas's judicial system. At 48, she had spent years carving out a reputation as a formidable force, a woman who commanded the courtroom with unwavering authority. Her rulings were sharp, her presence even sharper. Attorneys feared her, defendants respected her, and young black women idolized her. She wasn't just a judge, she was an institution, a symbol of discipline and excellence. But behind that meticulously crafted image was a woman obsessed with control. Perfection wasn't just a goal for Marquita, it was an expectation, a demand. Every aspect of her life had to align with the vision she had constructed. Her home, a sprawling estate in Highland Park, was a reflection of her rigid standards, flawless, calculated, and designed for admiration. Her wardrobe, her social circle, even her speech, every detail was curated. Nothing was ever out of place. Because in Marquita's world, control was everything. Her husband, Kendrick Stokes, was the perfect counterpart, or so it seemed. At 52, he was the kind of man who could walk into a room and own it within seconds. With a towering frame, a $1 million smile, and a voice that dripped with confidence, Kendrick had built an empire from the ground up. A former contractor turned real estate mogul, he had taken Dallas by storm, flipping properties and closing deals that made headlines. Kendrick had charm, ambition, and money, three things Marquita valued. When they met, she saw a man who matched her hunger for success. He wasn't intimidated by her power, if anything, he was drawn to it. They were a force, two titans moving in sync, their influence stretching across the city. For years, they played the part of Dallas royalty. They graced charity galas, hosted extravagant dinner parties, and mingled with city officials and celebrities. Judges, attorneys, developers, everyone wanted to be in their orbit. To outsiders, Marquita and Kendrick were the epitome of black excellence, a couple who had beaten the odds and built a dynasty. But perfection is often a mask, and behind theirs lurked something rotten. Marquita's need for control was suffocating, her expectations relentless. What she saw as discipline, Kendrick saw as dominance. And Kendrick, for all his charm, had a weakness, one that Marquita could never tolerate. Because in Marquita's world, there was no room for betrayal. And when she discovered the one thing she could never forgive, their perfect life began to crumble. Kendrick Stokes had always been a man with an appetite, for power, for success, and for women. Marquita had known this when she married him. But she believed she had tamed him, molded him into a man who understood that she was not like the others. She was not a woman to be disrespected, discarded, or deceived. She was Marquita Stokes, judge, icon, and the keeper of order in every aspect of her life. And yet, the moment she found that diamond bracelet tucked away in his drawer, she knew. It wasn't hers. She didn't even wear bracelets, too much of a distraction in the courtroom. The design was young, trendy, something worn by a woman who flaunted gifts instead of earning them. A woman who didn't understand the discipline required to build an empire but was eager to enjoy its spoils. Marquita didn't react, not immediately. Instead, she set the bracelet back exactly where she found it, smoothed the bedsheets, and walked away. She needed proof before she made her move. She hired a private investigator the next morning. It took less than a week to get what she needed. The first photos showed Kendrick and Brielle Dunbar at a restaurant, his hand resting on her thigh, his mouth dangerously close to her ear as he whispered something that made her laugh. The next set had them slipping into a luxury hotel, Kendrick's hand gripping Brielle's waist like she belonged to him. Marquita stared at the images in silence. Brielle Dunbar. She had known the girl was ambitious. Had even admired how she had turned a bottle service job at one of Dallas's elite clubs into a career in real estate. But Marquita had also seen the desperation in her, how she used her beauty to climb, how she attached herself to powerful men like an accessory to be worn and discarded when they were done. But Kendrick wasn't discarding her. He had been keeping her. Marquita could have confronted him that night, thrown the photos in his face, demanded an explanation. But she already knew what he would say. He would deny it, twist the truth, make himself the victim. Worse, if she filed for divorce, he would manipulate the narrative. He would turn their marriage into a spectacle, let the world paint her as the bitter, scorned wife who had driven him away with her coldness. She could already hear the whispers, even a judge can't keep her own husband in check. Marquita refused to be humiliated. She refused to be powerless. If Kendrick wanted Brielle, fine. He could have her. In the afterlife. Marquita Stokes had always believed in justice. The kind that was swift, decisive, and absolute. But justice and revenge were two different beasts. The night she made her decision, she sat in her darkened bedroom, staring at the images of Kendrick and Brielle tangled together in their stolen moments. The rage she had been suppressing for weeks began to seep through the cracks of her carefully constructed composure. She felt it slither through her veins, cold and methodical. Divorce was not an option. Scandal was not an option. But power, that was something she still had. She needed someone who could handle this quietly. Someone who wouldn't hesitate. That someone was Rashad Six Mallory. Her younger cousin had been in and out of trouble since he was 15. Petty thefts, assaults, suspected, though never proven, murders. In the underworld, he was known for making problems disappear. But to Marquita, he was still the boy who used to crash at her house when his own mother threw him out. She called him late one night, her voice calm, steady. "I need you to do something for me." Rashad didn't ask questions. He never did. By the next evening, they sat in his car in an abandoned lot outside the city. Rashad leaned back in the driver's seat, watching her through half-lidded eyes, one hand tapping against the steering wheel. "You sure you want to do this, Judge?" he asked. His voice carried the weight of a man who had seen the worst of humanity and had learned to profit from it. Marquita didn't blink. "I'm sure." $75,000. The number didn't faze her. "Half now, half when it's done." Rashad nodded. "How you want it handled?" She told him the plan. It had to be clean, no witnesses, no loose ends. Kendrick's routine was predictable. He jogged the same 3-mile loop at White Rock Lake every evening, earbuds in, lost in his own world. That's when Rashad and his associate would strike. It would look like a robbery gone wrong. A random act of violence in a city full of crime. Marquita left that meeting without a trace of hesitation. She had sentenced hundreds of men in her courtroom with a steady hand and an unshakable voice. This was no different. Wednesday night. 8:43 p.m. Kendrick laced up his sneakers and stepped out of their gated estate, stretching as he checked his phone. Brielle had texted him, "A simple can't wait to see you tomorrow." He smirked, pocketing the phone before setting off toward the lake. The jogging trail was nearly empty, save for a few late-night runners. The air was crisp, the water still. He never saw them coming. The first bullet tore through his knee, shattering bone, sending him crashing to the ground with a strangled cry. His hands scrambled at the dirt, his body convulsing in pain. He tried to turn, to look his attackers in the eye, but the second shot came before he could. A bullet to the chest. Quick. Efficient. Rashad and his associate grabbed Kendrick's wallet and phone, making it look like a robbery before vanishing into the night. By the time another jogger stumbled upon Kendrick's body, his blood had already seeped into the gravel, his lifeless eyes staring up at the darkened sky. Marquita received the call at 9:27 p.m. A police officer. A voice laced with sympathy, telling her that her husband had been shot. A random attack, they suspected. A tragic case of wrong place, wrong time. She dropped the phone, let out a strangled sob, and collapsed to her knees. The perfect performance. The following days were a blur of candlelight vigils, news interviews, and an outpouring of sympathy from the city. "He was the love of my life," she told the cameras, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to go on without him." The people mourned Kendrick Stokes, a brilliant businessman, a loving husband, a man taken too soon. What they didn't know was that the woman wiping tears from her face was the one who had ordered his execution. For weeks, Marquita played her part flawlessly. She was the grieving widow, the shattered woman who had lost the love of her life to senseless violence. She sat front row at vigils, clutching a candle with trembling hands. She wept in front of news cameras, thanking the community for their support. She held her children close, whispering promises that justice would be served. And the city bought every bit of it. She had always been a woman who commanded respect, and now, that respect had turned into devotion. Strangers sent flowers to her home. Clergy members prayed for her strength. The mayor himself called to offer condolences. But not everyone was convinced. Brielle Dunbar had spent the past year living in the shadows of Marquita's marriage, waiting for the day Kendrick would leave his wife for good. That day had been coming. She had seen the proof, the hidden apartment Kendrick had leased for them, the signed paperwork for a divorce attorney. He had been ready to start over. And then, just like that, he was gone. Brielle attended the funeral, standing in the back, sunglasses covering her red-rimmed eyes. The entire ceremony felt staged. The tears, the speeches, the dramatic proclamations of love from a woman Kendrick had been planning to leave. And then there was the money, millions in life insurance, a fortune transferred neatly into Marquita's account. Brielle wasn't stupid. She knew powerful people didn't fall victim to random crimes. Someone had wanted Kendrick dead. And she had a feeling she knew exactly who. Rashad Six Mallory had always been a dangerous man, but he was also reckless. And greedy. He had done his part. He had played by the rules. Now, he wanted what was his. The problem was, Marquita had been stalling. Days turned into weeks, and still, no second payment. At first, Rashad had given her space, understanding that a woman of her status couldn't just hand over thousands of dollars without raising suspicion. But patience wasn't his strong suit, and frustration took over. One night, at a rundown bar on the south side of Dallas, Rashad got drunk and sloppy. He leaned over to a man he barely knew, an associate he thought he could trust, and bragged about the hit. "Man, you see that judge on TV? All them tears? Yeah, she the one paid me to take him out. Cold-blooded." What Rashad didn't know was that his associate was a confidential informant for the Dallas PD. By morning, homicide detectives had his name. By the next day, his phone was tapped. Within 72 hours, they had everything they needed. They listened to Rashad's phone calls, heard him complain about Marquita holding out on his money. Then came the text messages, angry demands for payment, vague threats. And finally, the damning piece of evidence. A recorded call where Marquita, in a moment of frustration, confirmed exactly what had happened. "It's done. You'll get your money. Just don't make a mistake and bring this back to me." That was all they needed. The courtroom was full that morning. Lawyers, reporters, and everyday citizens packed the benches, eager to watch Judge Marquita Stokes preside over another high-profile case. She walked in as she always did, poised, elegant, untouchable. She adjusted her robe, took her seat, and called the first case to order. Then, the doors swung open. Uniformed officers stepped inside, their presence sucking the air from the room. A detective approached the bench, his expression unreadable. "Judge Stokes, we have a warrant for your arrest." For a split second, the courtroom was silent. No gasps. No whispers. Just stunned, frozen disbelief. Marquita didn't panic. She didn't protest. She simply removed her glasses, set them on the desk, and held out her wrists. The handcuffs clicked into place. And just like that, the woman who had spent her life sentencing criminals became one herself. The moment Judge Marquita Stokes was led out of her own courtroom in handcuffs, the story exploded. Dallas had seen scandals before, corrupt politicians, dirty cops, even high-profile affairs, but nothing like this. A powerful black female judge, a pillar of the community, accused of orchestrating the murder of her husband. It was the kind of case that turned journalists into vultures, feeding on every new revelation with insatiable hunger. Within hours, her mugshot was everywhere. The once impeccable Marquita Stokes, stripped of her judicial robe, wearing an orange jumpsuit, her expression unreadable. Some saw defiance. Others saw fear. News anchors dissected every detail. How could a woman who spent decades upholding justice turn into a criminal mastermind? Was this a crime of passion or pure calculation? Pundits debated her downfall on national television. Some framed her as a woman scorned, driven to desperation by her husband's infidelity. Others painted her as a cold-blooded killer who thought she was too powerful to be caught. And then there was Brielle Dunbar. The city turned on her with venomous rage. Kendrick's death may have been orchestrated by his wife, but in the eyes of the public, Brielle was still to blame. The woman who had wormed her way into a married man's life, who had disrupted a perfect marriage, who had ultimately sealed his fate. Her name was dragged through the mud. Social media erupted with death threats. She deactivated her accounts, deleted her phone number, and disappeared. But there was no hiding from this. Because while the city crucified Brielle, the investigation kept unfolding, and the evidence was damning. The first leak came from an anonymous source inside the DA's office. A voice memo. Marquita's voice, cool and controlled, discussing the details of Kendrick's execution. Make it look random. A mugging, a carjacking, something that won't point back to me. The public reeled. The woman who had sentenced countless criminals with righteous authority had plotted a murder as if she were ordering a business transaction. More evidence followed. Call logs. Bank transactions. A chilling text message sent the night before Kendrick's murder. Handle it. No mistakes. Talk radio hosts tore her apart. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, demanding the harshest sentence possible. Marquita had spent her career commanding respect, but now, the same city that once revered her was calling for her head. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, former colleagues, city officials, everyone who had once admired Marquita Stokes now came to witness her downfall. She sat at the defense table, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. The same air of authority she had wielded from the bench clung to her, but it no longer held power here. She wasn't presiding over this case. She was the case. The prosecution was ruthless. They painted Marquita as a woman obsessed with control, someone who couldn't bear the thought of losing, not her marriage, not her reputation, not the narrative she had so carefully constructed. They laid out the evidence methodically, the phone records, the bank withdrawals, the damning voice memo where she coldly ordered her husband's execution. They played it for the jury, the courtroom gripped in silence. Make it look random. A mugging, a carjacking, something that won't point back to me. No emotion crossed Marquita's face, but the weight of her own words filled the room like a death sentence. Her defense fought back. They tried to argue that Rashad acted alone, that Marquita was being framed by a man looking for a payday. They claimed the voice memo was taken out of context. But it was weak. The evidence was airtight, and everyone in the room knew it. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the air was thick with anticipation. Madam Foreperson, have you reached a verdict? A pause. Then. We have, Your Honor. Marquita didn't blink as the foreperson spoke the words that sealed her fate. Guilty. A sharp gasp rippled through the courtroom. Marquita Stokes, the once revered judge, was now a convicted murderer. Her sentence was swift and merciless, life in prison without the possibility of parole. She stood as the judge delivered the punishment, her face unreadable. For years, she had determined the fates of criminals from the bench. Now, her own fate had been decided, and there was no appeal, no last-minute technicality that could save her. As she was led out of the courtroom in shackles, cameras flashed, capturing the moment that would forever define her legacy. Kendrick Stokes was gone, his empire left in shambles. His death sent shockwaves through Dallas's elite, a grim reminder that even the most powerful could fall. The city whispered about the scandal for years, how a marriage built on success crumbled into murder. How the woman who once ruled the courtroom now spent her days in a prison cell, stripped of her power, reduced to a number. And Brielle? She vanished. No more social media. No more high-end real estate deals. Some said she fled Dallas, unable to escape the guilt and the whispers that followed her wherever she went. Others claimed she was still there, living in the shadows, forever haunted by the blood spilled in her name. One thing was certain. The story of Judge Marquita Stokes would never be forgotten. Power. Betrayal. Revenge. This case is a haunting reminder that even the most powerful are not immune to the darkness of obsession. Marquita had everything: prestige, wealth, influence. But it wasn't enough. Her need to dictate the narrative, to decide how the story would end, became her downfall. Now, the same system she once upheld has condemned her to spend the rest of her life behind bars. But was Marquita simply a woman betrayed, pushed past her breaking point? Or was she a cold, calculating mastermind who believed she could outmaneuver the very justice she once served? And what about Kendrick? Did his secrets and lies set this tragedy into motion? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. If this story shocked you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more cases that expose the darkest corners of love and deceit.